Hello and welcome to chapter 7 of the Gospel of John. I'm Paul Estro. Behind the camera, as always, the lovely Amy Estro. And we are at the Halsey Valley Victory House here in Spencer, New York, which is in upstate New York. And we are going through the Gospel of John. And we are so thankful and appreciative that you have joined us. If you want to drop us a line, let us know what you think, what you're listening for, what else we could do to make it better. We would love to hear from you. I know we don't have a big following, but we are very thankful for those of you who come every week and listen to us. So today we are in chapter 7, which my Bible, which I'm using a Holman Christian Standard, titles as The Unbelief of Jesus' Brothers. So Jesus has just performed all these miracles. Feeding the 5,000, walking on water, healing one of a multitude of people who were sick, lame, at the temple. And here, after all this stuff, John says, Jesus traveled to Galilee, since he did not want to travel to Judea because the Jews were trying to kill him. The Jewish festival of tabernacles was near. So his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, so your disciples can see your works that you are doing. For no one does anything in secret while he's seeking public recognition. If you do these things, why don't you show yourself to the world?" For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus told them, "My time has not yet arrived, but your time is always at hand. The world cannot hate you, but it does hate me because I testify about it, that its decrees, that its deeds are evil. Go up to the festival yourselves. I'm not going up to the festival yet because my time has not yet fully come." After he said these things, he stayed in Galilee. And then verse 10 says, after his brothers had gone up to the festival, then he also went up, not openly, but secretly. See, and the Jews were looking for him at the festival and saying, "Where is he?" There was a lot of discussion about him among the crowd. Some were saying he's a good man. Others were saying, no, on the contrary, he's deceiving the people. Still, nobody was talking publicly about him because they feared the Jews. There was the leadership who didn't want you speaking about Jesus. In fact, they would throw you out of the temple at this point if you were said to be a follower of him. And when the festival was already half over, Jesus went up into the temple complex and began to teach. Then the Jews were amazed, and they said, "How does he know the scripture since he hasn't been trained?" Jesus answered them, "My teaching isn't mine, but it's from the one who sent me. If anyone wants to do his will, he will understand whether the teaching is from God or if I'm speaking on my own. The one who speaks for himself seeks his own glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Didn't Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you want to kill me?" And the crowd says, "You have a demon. Who wants to kill you?" Jesus said, "I did one work. One work. And you're all amazed." He's talking about healing the man at the pool here. Jesus says, "Consider this. Moses has given you circumcision, not that it comes from Moses, but from the fathers. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses won't be broken, are you angry at me because I made a man entirely well on the Sabbath? Stop judging according to outward appearances. Rather, judge according to righteous judgment." Wow. So I read that whole section there, and we'll go back and talk about 1 through 13 here, Jesus has 4 brothers. James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon, plus at least 2 sisters. And we know this from Matthew 12:46 through 50, and 13:54 to 57. And I want to read that briefly here. We go to Matthew. I didn't mark this, so this will be fun. I got to find it here. Matthew 12:46. Jesus was speaking to the crowds, and suddenly his mother and brothers were standing outside wanting to speak to him. And someone yelled to Jesus, "Hey, look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." But he replied to the one who told them, he said, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Stretching out his hand towards the disciples, he said, "Here are my mothers and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven, that person is my brother and mother." And then we move ahead to 13:54. Jesus went to his hometown and began to teach them in their synagogue. And they were astonished, and they said, "How did this wisdom and these miracles come to him? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother called Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And his sisters, aren't they all with us?" So where does he get all these things? And they were offended by him, Scripture tells us right there. Now, the early church, the medieval church, believing that Mary was a perpetual virgin, came to the conclusion, although there's no biblical evidence, that these brothers and sisters must be from a previous marriage that Joseph had. And that didn't really stay well with the church, and by the time the Roman Catholic Church came along, the Roman Catholic Church believes that James, Joseph, Jude, Simon, and the sisters are cousins, not Jesus' brother. But Scripture tells us they're his brothers, and so that's the general belief in Orthodox Christianity, that they truly are his real half-brothers, as it were, and sisters. And here's an interesting thing. Scripture tells us, well, Jesus was alive. They didn't believe in him. We just read that. And Jesus said to them, "You go up to the festival. You go to the temple. You practice your Judaism. You practice your religion. My time hasn't come yet. The world hates you."
No.
Wow. Say what?
The world hates them.
That's not what he said? Right? Or no, I'm sorry, the world hates me.
Right.
It's okay. Jesus says the world hates me, but it doesn't hate you. That's why I have Amy around to keep me on track here, as the brain thinks one thing and the mind comes out the mouth something else. But my thought, we know James and Jude came to be disciples after Jesus died, after he appeared to them. They believed. There is nothing in Scripture that gives us any indication whatsoever that the other 2 brothers, Joseph and Simon, and the sisters, ever became believers. And Jesus says to him here in John, "The world hates me because its deeds are evils, but the world cannot hate you, right, because they're of the world." So my thought is, if Jesus' brothers and sisters aren't saved, growing up with him, being with him, wow, what does that say? I mean, think about that. His own family apparently isn't saved, not all of them. And he says, they're of the world, not of him. Same thing he said to the leadership, right? That he tells the Pharisees, your father is the devil. And he says, you don't know me. That's a pretty scary thought, as is we see here that they appear to be religious, right? They're going to the festival. There were three huge festivals every year: Passover, Pentecost, and this festival of tabernacles, or the booths, celebrating them coming out of Egypt and tabernacling in the wilderness. And so they appear religious, but apparently aren't saved, which should really be sobering to us. And then Jesus is talking to the crowd, and I have to laugh. I'm being distracted here because I have a hole in my Bible where the cat put her claw through it. Reminds me of Tiger every time I see this. But Jesus is calling them hypocrites here, because we can move ahead to the next part here. The Jews are whining, and Jesus calls them hypocrites. Because, see, they'll break the law of doing work on the Sabbath by having somebody circumcised, because on the 8th day, the males had to be circumcised, whether it was the Sabbath or not. So they're willing to do that. But they're angry at Jesus because he made somebody well on the Sabbath. And he really didn't, he just spoke it into existence. Pick up your mat and walk. And the guy did. But they're mad at him for this. And so he tells them to judge according to righteous judgment. Think about what you're saying. You'd rather have people be sick and lame and not allowed in the temple because they're sick and lame than to make them well, to break what you consider the law, which is something they've made up, because the law of Moses itself never said you can't pick up your mat and walk. It was a tradition. So he's getting into this argument with them. And of course the Jews love to whine. That's all they did for 40 years in the wilderness, was complain. And now they're complaining about Jesus, that he's going against tradition. He's going against what should be. And they're saying, well, we kind of know him. We've seen him growing up, and now you're saying these things. And they're not looking at what he's doing. They're not looking at Scripture. We're going to see that here in a bit. So we go ahead in 25. Jesus says to some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, isn't this the man they want to kill? Yet look, he's speaking publicly. They're saying nothing to him. Can it be true that the authorities know he's the Messiah? Could it be they really know he's the Messiah and they're just trying to, it's a conspiracy theory against us. But we know where this man is from. When the Messiah comes, nobody will know where he is from. That's kind of what they were believing, obviously, tells us here. And as he was teaching in the temple complex, Jesus cried out, "You know me, and you know where I am from. Yet I have not come on my own. But the one who sent me is true. You don't know him. I know him, because I am from him, and he sent me." That's quite a bold statement right there. You don't know God, but I do, because I'm from God. I've seen God. And they tried to seize him because he's saying these blasphemous things as far as they're concerned. Yet no one laid a hand on him, because his hour had not yet come. However, many of the crowd believed in him and said, when the Messiah comes, he won't perform more signs than this man has done, will he? The Pharisees heard the crowd muttering these things about him, so the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple police to arrest him. Now, keep that in the back of your head. Then Jesus said, I am only with you for a short time. Then I'm going to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come. Then the Jews said to one another, where does he intend to go that we won't find him? He doesn't intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks, does he? What is this remark he made? You'll look for me, and you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come. They're just so confused. And they're just scratching their head and wondering. So, this is the middle of the week. And on the last day, verse 37, on the last and most important day of the festival, Jesus stood up and he cries out, If anyone is thirsty, he should come to me and drink. The one who believes in me, as the scripture has said, will have streams of living water flow from deep within him. He said this about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were going to receive. For the Spirit had not yet been received, because Jesus had not yet been glorified. When some of the crowd heard these words, they said, "This really is the prophet." Others said, "This is the Messiah." But some said, "Well, no, surely the Messiah doesn't come from Galilee, does he? Doesn't Scripture say that the Messiah comes from David's offspring and from the town of Bethlehem?" We know David was born. Well, we know Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is like 5 miles from Jerusalem where they were. But nobody bothers asking Jesus, "Hey, I know it says you're known as Jesus the Nazarene, the Nazarite from Nazareth, but where were you born?" They never ask these questions, and I think a lot of times we don't ask questions because we don't want to know the answer. But a division occurred among the crowd because of him, and some wanted to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him. Then the temple police came to the chief priests and Pharisees, and they asked him, "Well, why haven't you brought him?" So the police they send out come back without him, and they go, "Well, where is he?" And the police answered, "No man's ever spoke like this." Then the Pharisees responded to them, "Are you fooled too? Now, have any of the rulers here believed in him?" Well, we know Nicodemus is thinking about it. "Or any of the Pharisees? But this crowd, which doesn't know the law, is accursed." So they're just sticking their noses down at the rabble out in the temple, the commoner, Now Nicodemus, the one who came to him previously, being one of them, said to them, "Our law doesn't judge a man before it hears from him and knows what he is doing, does it?" So Nicodemus says, our law says we need to really talk to this guy. We need to see what's going on. Maybe ask some tough questions. "You aren't from Galilee too, are you?" I'm sure they're all laughing at him because, backwater place of Galilee, who would, what ruling class would come from there? So they replied, "You investigate and you'll see. No prophet arises from Galilee." So a couple of things that are interesting here. First of all, there are 2 prophets that we know of that did come from Galilee, Hosea and Jonah. So that kind of tells us that this leadership isn't quite as versed, what?
Either honest or versed.
Honest or versed, yeah, as they tend to be. And Nicodemus, who earlier had gone to Jesus at night, and you can go back if you haven't seen that study, here he sets himself up. I'll go talk to Jesus. Let me investigate this, right? They say, "You go investigate this." So he now has permission. He can go be seen with Jesus, and if anyone says anything, he can say, "Well, they asked me to investigate." So he set himself up in a good spot here, which is good. And we see the leadership here, sticking their nose down at the crowd, sticking their nose down at Jesus. They're not really investigating. They're not being good Bereans, as we see in Acts, where the Bereans actually studied Scripture to see if what they were thinking was true, which would be a wonderful thing if more people did that, instead of blindly believing people. Actually study Scripture and let Scripture dictate your beliefs instead of the other way around. Amazing concept. We also see that piety and fear of God is not always found in the church. If the leadership truly was following God, they would really want to make sure what was spoken was the truth. Really make sure things line up, and they don't. And of course, the crowd doesn't really know. They're all going by, what they've heard, right? This mob mentality. If we go to our last slide here, while many hearts were divided over who Jesus was, and it was more an emotional thing, like, "Oh, well, he's done all these miracles, that must be amazing." There's this chess match going on, and I have this picture of the chess match here. Jesus is kind of playing with the crowd, playing with the Pharisees. He could have very easily come out and said, "Hang on, Let me explain this to you. And we see, on the road to Emmaus, he did explain to two disciples all that the Old Testament said about him. But here he doesn't speak and say, "Oh, excuse me, I was born 5 miles away over there in Bethlehem. Yeah, let me show you the scripture. Hey, these two prophets did come from there. Let me show you everything I've been fulfilling. Let me show you exactly what you need to know here." He doesn't do that, right? Instead, he responds to questions with questions. He's trying to get people to think for themselves and to sort it out in their own mind. And that's kind of where we're at with Scripture, right? It's kind of a chess match in a way, and figure out, well, how does this New Testament teaching line up with Old Testament, and how do the pieces all go together, right? And we can't have a hodgepodge of ideas. You're never going to win the game, right? And the thing about playing chess with God is he knows all possible outcomes. So you can, play whatever move you want to make. He's got it all figured out. And we've talked about that before as well. So when it comes to our theology, when it comes to Scripture, we have to understand, right? The book of John was written like, as one piece. It's like a movie. When you see what happens in the beginning, you have to keep track of that to see how it plays out in the end. And here Jesus, it all goes back to the healing in chapter 5. And Jesus is laying claim to who he is for those who have ears to hear and eyes to see. And that's how it is with us. We are responsible for our salvation. You need to read Scripture and study it and spend time with God to know God. So next time we will look at chapter 8. We'll continue these themes. And I thank you so much for watching to the end here. May God bless you and keep you until next time.